I'm a 29-year-old woman, and until 2 weeks ago, I thought I had a good life. Not great, just good enough. I had a well-paying job in corporate, a nice apartment in a respectable building, a fiancé who checked every box on my parents' silent list, and a family who said they were proud of me. But if you peeled back just one layer, you'd find something different, something hollow. Growing up, I was never told I was the favorite. I wasn't spoiled. I wasn't praised. I was shaped, molded, curated. My mother ran the household like it was a brand campaign. Everything had to be presentable. Perfect. My brother was allowed to exist freely, skating by with CS, skipping church, bringing girls home. But me. I had rules that were never spoken, only enforced with looks and pauses. I wasn't allowed to cut my hair short, diet, or wear anything that could be described as bold. Once in high school, I wore red lipstick to a winter recital. My mother didn't say a word about it. She just handed me a makeup wipe in the car with a tissue folded neatly on top. Every part of my schedule was theirs. Piano lessons, charity drives, summer internships arranged through my father's connections. I never protested because I knew what happened when I stepped out of line. Silence. Long silences. Their specialty. My first panic attack at 17 ended with my mother saying, "You're just tired. You don't need a therapist, you need rest." And rest meant doing what they wanted, quietly without adding to their stress. College wasn't a conversation. It was an announcement. Small liberal art school, 40 minutes from home, excellent rankings. I was told it would give me the right environment. They said I didn't need to live on campus because our home was safe. My mother withdrew my dorm application before I even saw it. I was enrolled in business, a sensible major, as my father called it, something that leads somewhere. I was never interested in business. I wanted to study design. I once mentioned it during a family dinner, and my mother froze mid-bite. "That's a hobby," she said, "not a career." After graduating early, I was placed into a job through one of my dad's golf buddies. The office was beige. The people were beige. I stayed quiet, nodded, and exceeded expectations. Promotions came fast. I moved into a one-bedroom in a building my parents partly owned, and they chose the furniture. My mother spent weekends decorating it, saying things like minimalism is more sophisticated. Color distracts the eye. She picked gray for everything, even the dishes. I dated quietly, men who wouldn't rattle the image. The one person I actually loved was a painter named Ellis. We met through a local art show I visited by accident. He was passionate and messy, and he made me laugh in a way I hadn't since middle school. I brought him to meet my parents once. That was all it took. "He seems unstable," my mother said on the drive home. My father was more direct. "That's not someone you build a life with." The next morning, my mother called and asked if I'd thought things through. Ellis texted me a few days later, "I don't think your life has space for me in it." He wasn't wrong. Ryan came later. Stable, quiet, respectful. He wore light blue shirts and always asked about my parents when we met. My mother adored him. My father said, "Now that's a man with a plan." We dated for 3 years. When he proposed, my parents were more excited than I was. Wedding planning started the next day. My mother had already bookmarked venues. My father volunteered to cover the first deposit. I went along with it. At Sunlight, I smiled at bridal showers, sat through cake tastings, nodded through dress fittings. I chose a simple gown, lace, floor length, nothing flashy. My mother cried when I tried it on. "You look like everything I dreamed of," she said. I wanted to scream. 2 weeks before the wedding, I started clearing out the closet in the guest room. Ryan wanted to turn it into a home office after the wedding. In a storage bin beneath old tax documents and winter coats, I found a stack of journals from when I was a teenager. The handwriting was shaky at first, then sharper, angrier. I flipped through pages filled with questions I'd stopped asking years ago. Why do they get to decide who I am? Do they love me or just what I represent? What if I just said no? I sat on the floor, surrounded by those journals, and realized I had planned every move in my life around what they would approve of. Not just big things, everything. What I wore, what I said, who I dated, even how I laughed. I remembered once practicing a quieter laugh after my mother told me mine sounded too eager. I looked up. My wedding dress was hanging on the back of the closet door, pristine, untouched. It didn't feel like a symbol of joy. It felt like their final trophy, the last piece of proof that I'd played the role right. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't second guess it. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and told Ryan I couldn't marry him. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. He looked at me for a long time and asked, because of them? I didn't answer. By morning, I was gone. No text to my parents. No dramatic announcement. I left the apartment keys on the counter. The only thing I took was my name, my journals, and the one decision I made for myself. The morning after I ended things with Ryan, I made coffee like I always did. 2 matching mugs. Same kitchen. Same countertop. He walked in half asleep, sat down, and reached for his cup. I handed it to him, sat across from him, and said, "I can't marry you." No build-up. No speech. Just the truth. Finally spoken out loud. He didn't shout or slam anything. He just sat there, blinking. Then he asked, "Because of your parents?" I didn't answer, but he didn't need me to. He nodded once, slow, and didn't say anything else. I finished my coffee, packed a single suitcase, and left. By noon, I was standing outside a rental apartment on the far side of the city, one I'd looked at online months ago but never had the nerve to tour. Beige walls, flickering hallway light, a faint smell of old curry from the neighbor's place. It was ugly, and it was perfect. I signed the lease on the spot, paid first and last month's rent in cash, and carried my suitcase up the stairs myself. By 4 p.m., I was unlocking the door with one hand while holding a bag of takeout in the other. The place had mismatched flooring and a shower that groaned every time I turned the handle. I sat on the bare floor with my food and ate in total silence. No TV, no wedding calls, no expectations. 3 hours later, someone knocked. I didn't answer. Then I heard my mother's voice through the door, muffled but sharp. "We need to talk." I didn't move. She kept knocking. Then my father's voice joined in. "We just want to understand." I opened the door enough to see their faces and told them they weren't invited in. My mother glanced around the hallway behind me and said, "This is not how we raised you." I replied, "Exactly," and shut the door. That night, I took a sick leave from work, sent the HR email, burned through 5 vacation days, and turned off every notification on my phone. I didn't pick up any calls, didn't respond to texts. I left everything on silent. On the second day, I walked into a local salon I'd passed a dozen times before but never entered. I pointed at a photo taped to the mirror, short, auburn, chin length. She asked if I was sure. I nodded. 20 minutes later, I didn't recognize myself. I didn't want to. That same night, I pulled out an old storage box I'd stuffed in the back of my closet years ago. Sketchbooks, half-done illustrations, notes from a design course I never signed up for. I sat on the floor, flipping through pages, then opened my laptop and applied to a weekend course at a nearby community arts center. It took 7 minutes. On day 3, Jenna showed up. My best friend since high school. She walked in, looked me up and down, new haircut, apartment with no furniture, unpacked boxes, and smiled. "You look alive for the first time in years." I laughed, for real this time. On day 4, my brother called. I let it go to voicemail, but he kept calling. I finally picked up. He started with, "Mom's not doing well," and ended with, "Can you just apologize to keep the peace?" I told him if peace mattered so much, maybe he should try being the one who kept it for once. Then I hung up. He hasn't called since. On day 5, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote Ryan a letter. Not an email. Not a note on some app. A real letter in pen on thick paper. I told him the truth. That I never meant to use him, but I did. That he didn't deserve a life built on silence. Like that I hoped he found someone who chose him for real. I walked to his building and slipped it under the door. No return address. That afternoon, I logged out of every social media account and deleted them. Instagram, Facebook, even the ones I barely used. All gone. They were just windows I kept open for others to peer into and feel proud of. They were full of fake smiles, filtered dinners, and captions I edited twice before posting. It felt like wiping fingerprints off glass. By the weekend, I booked my first therapy session. Not the guidance counselor they made me talk to in high school. Not the online quizzes I used to take late at night to figure out what was wrong with me. Real therapy, with a woman who didn't ask for a backstory. She just asked, "Where do you want to start?" I said, "The part where I stopped living my own life." That night, I opened the windows. No curtains, no filters, just air, just me. I ordered new sketchbooks, bought cheap paints, and stayed up past midnight making a mess. I fell asleep on the floor, paint on my hands, with the city humming outside like it had been waiting for me to finally arrive. 3 days after I cut my hair and moved into the apartment, a package arrived. No return address, but the handwriting on the label gave it away. Inside was a scrapbook, photos of my childhood, bridal shower RSVPs, ribbon menu cards for a wedding that would never happen. Tucked between the pages was a folded note. 5 words, "Don't throw everything away." I threw it out the same day, every last piece, even the box. 2 days later, I answered a call from an unknown number. I thought it might be the college admin from the design course. It wasn't. It was my father. His voice was flat. He asked, "What are you trying to prove?" I told him that I exist outside of you, and ended the call without waiting for what came next. I blocked the number immediately. I haven't heard from it since. That afternoon, my landlord texted, "Your parents came by," claimed it was an emergency. I didn't let them in. I thanked him, then marched straight down to the building manager's office. I requested my lease be updated, no visitors allowed without prior written notice from me. He printed the addendum right there, and I signed it. The following morning, I walked into my second therapy session. The first had been mostly paperwork. This time, I spoke for 45 minutes without interruption. I talked about the rules that were never rules, the punishments that never looked like punishments. At some point, I noticed I had been crying, not because of what I was saying, but because nobody cut me off. I left with an appointment for the following week and a tiny, folded sheet of paper in my pocket where I'd written the phrase, "Keep going." That evening, I walked into a tattoo studio 2 blocks from my apartment. The artist was in the middle of sketching when I asked for something simple, a flame, small, clean, right on the inside of my wrist. I didn't want it to be loud. I just wanted it to be mine. 20 minutes later, it was done. Later that night, I pulled out one of my old sketchbooks and opened a browser window. I scanned a few of my paintings and uploaded them to an anonymous art forum I used to browse in college. I didn't tag my name, didn't add any story, just images. A few people liked them. One person messaged asking if I sold prints. I didn't reply, but I stared at that message for a long time. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "Call me. This has gone too far." I didn't reply. I didn't block her, but I didn't respond. I put the phone in a drawer and left it there. I spent the day cleaning up the apartment. I found a small space by the window that got decent light. I pushed a folding table against the wall and turned it into a mini studio. That same night, I invited Jenna over. I told her everything about the package, the calls, the tattoo, the uploads. She listened and then said her cousin ran a small gallery space downtown and had been looking for local artists. She offered to connect us. I didn't answer her right away. I just nodded. A couple days later, I got an email. It was from Ryan's sister. She'd heard about the wedding being called off. The email was short. She said she understood and hoped I was okay. It wasn't long or dramatic, but it meant something, especially from someone who used to call my parents the classiest people she ever met. More messages started pouring in, extended family, mostly. Aunts, cousins, people I hadn't seen since high school. All of them said they were concerned. Some were polite. Some were obviously scripted. But the subtext in every message was the same: "You've embarrassed your parents." I didn't answer any of them. I didn't delete them either. I just read each one once, then archived it. That weekend, I was sorting through my old backup hard drive. It hadn't been turned on in years. I was digging for reference images for a new piece when I found an old folder labeled voice memos. One of them had a timestamp from the summer after college. I clicked it. It was my father on a call, probably with a coworker. He was bragging about me. "She's the perfect mold," he said. "Follows the rules, never fights back." I listened to it twice. Then I saved it, just to remind myself why I left. I stayed up that night painting. I used charcoal ink and watercolors. I didn't plan anything. I just let the brush move. The final piece had jagged black lines and red streaks cutting through a faint outline of a girl with no face. I titled it Unmolding. It was the first time in years something I created didn't feel like an assignment. That same night, I drafted an email to Jenna's cousin. I attached a few photos of my work, including unmolding, and asked if they'd be open to a small exhibit. Nothing big, just a weekend showing. I hit send without rereading it. The next morning, I looked around my apartment. It still smelled like takeout. The floor was uneven. The ceiling fan clicked every time it rotated. But there, on the wall above my sketch table, unmolding was pinned with 2 thumbtacks. And for the first time in 10 years, the art didn't scare me. It made sense. Because this time, it was mine. A group message lit up my phone on a Thursday night. My cousin was getting engaged, and my parents were hosting a brunch. The invite was short, formal, and sent to a dozen relatives at once. No call, no personal note, just a link with the time and place. I replied yes. The morning of the brunch, I pulled out a navy jumpsuit I had bought weeks ago on a whim. It had a deep V neckline and wide legs, something I never would have dared wear before. I left my hair loose and unbrushed, still dyed a soft auburn. I wore bold earrings, blue, beaded, loud. I didn't bother to tone it down. I brought a gift with me. It wasn't from a registry. It was a painting I had made 2 nights prior, an abstract portrait of my cousin and her fiancé. Warm tones, layered textures, no faces. Just motion and light. I wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with a piece of twine. The house was full when I arrived. Every light was on, soft music played in the background, and the dining table was packed with catered trays and fake smiles. The second I stepped inside, the noise dipped. My aunt's eyes ran down my outfit like a scanner. My cousin gave me a wide smile. My mother's face didn't move. I found my cousin and handed her the painting. She peeled back the wrapping and stared at it for a long moment. Then she hugged me, held on a little longer than expected, and whispered thanks against my shoulder. Not long after, one of my uncles walked up, pulled me to the side near the hallway. He said my mother's heart was broken. I told him she's had 29 years to break mine, and this was just the result. He blinked but didn't argue. By the drinks table, my mother caught me. She smiled the kind of smile that was only for guests and whispered, "Don't make a scene." I laughed. I asked her if being here, like this, counted as a scene. Her smile faded. My father found me 10 minutes later. His first words were that I was going through a phase. He said no man would want a woman who acted out. I looked at him and said I wasn't acting anymore. I was just finally not performing. I left early, before dessert, but I didn't sneak out. I walked across the room, thanked my cousin again in front of everyone, kissed her cheek, and told her the piece was one of a kind, just like her. My mother stared at the floor. My father stood stiff near the hallway. I waved as I left. On the way home, I stopped at a bookstore. Near the checkout counter was a small flyer taped to the glass. A local arts collective was hosting an open call for artists, submissions open for 3 more days. I took a picture of the flyer, walked to my car, and emailed them from the parking lot. I attached photos of 3 pieces and wrote one line. My story's in these. That week at work, my boss called me into her office. She'd seen the mood shift. She asked if I wanted to take the lead on a rebranding pitch the company was putting together for a major client. It was a visual concept project, something she never even mentioned me for before. I said yes without hesitating. That night, I stayed up until 2 in the morning sketching. Pages of thumbnails, color swatches, slogans that didn't sound forced. My apartment was a mess, paintbrushes on the floor, post-its on the wall, tea gone cold. I didn't stop. In therapy later that week, my therapist asked what I was doing for revenge. I told her I wasn't doing anything. I just wasn't playing their game anymore. She smiled and wrote something down, but didn't share what. That weekend, I finally took the wedding dress out of the closet. I listed it online with a simple caption, "Never worn," and for a version of me that no longer exists. Within a day, it sold. The woman who bought it messaged me after it arrived. She said she was marrying someone she met after surviving cancer. I told her to wear it for her own story, not someone else's. 3 days later, I got an email from the downtown gallery Jenna's cousin managed. They wanted to showcase 3 of my pieces. A weekend feature. Nothing huge, but public. I confirmed the date and attached titles. I didn't ask my parents for help. I didn't tell them at all. On the night before submissions were due for the open call, I uploaded one final painting, one I had done after the brunch. It showed a woman walking into a crowded room full of mirrors, none of them showing her reflection. I titled it Scene. Then I submitted it, closed the laptop, and sat in silence. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was finally mine. The gallery gave me a narrow strip of wall and half a corner near the back. It didn't look like much, but it was mine. I called the show Clean Burn. Every piece was about the version of me my parents built, the neat, obedient, smiling daughter who followed the script, and what happened when I finally tore the script in half. I didn't tell my family about it, I didn't send invitations or post about it publicly, but Jenna came to the opening night and shared a photo on her social media. She tagged me. That's how it started. By noon the next day, I had 5 missed calls. 1 was from a number I didn't recognize, and 4 were from my mother. I didn't answer any of them. I let the voicemails pile up. Only one came through clearly, my mother's voice, tight and short, "Please don't humiliate us." I didn't call back. That night, the gallery was louder than I expected. People wandered in holding plastic cups of wine and whispering near the canvases. The lighting was warm. I stood near the back, pretending to adjust a frame. Around 7 p.m., my brother walked in. He didn't make a scene. He just stood in front of a piece titled Birthday Smile 14. It was based on a family photo where I wore a yellow dress and a cake sat in front of me. In the painting, my face had been scratched out in charcoal, the smile turned into a harsh slash across the canvas. He didn't say anything. He just stared, nodded, and left. Later, he texted me, "I didn't know. I see it now." Midway through the evening, a voice called my name. I turned and saw my old high school English teacher, Mrs. Blake. She looked older, softer. She pointed to the piece titled The Good Girl Script and said, "You always had a storm in you. Glad you let it out." Then she hugged me and moved on without waiting for a response. Before the end of the night, a woman with a notepad and a press badge asked if I'd speak to her. She wrote for the local paper, specifically the Sunday Arts column. She said the story behind the work felt personal, but also familiar. I gave her my real name and agreed. She snapped a photo of me standing in front of a canvas titled Resignation Letter Unsent, which was made up of layered rejection notes, job memos, and the first draft of the email I never sent my father when I left the family business internship in college. The article went live 2 days later. The photo ran front and center. That's how I know my parents saw it. A courier delivered a certified letter to my apartment that Friday. It was from my father. Typed, dated, formatted like a business memo. He called my exhibit a self-obsessed performance. He said I was tarnishing decades of investment, effort, and reputation. He ended it by writing, "We raised you better than this." I took the letter to the gallery the next morning, framed it in silver, labeled it parental investment, priced upon request, and hung it beside the exit. It got more attention than anything else. By the end of the night, someone offered to buy it. I sold it. Used the money to pay for a spot in a 6-week advanced painting course at the community center across town. During the second night, a woman approached me while I was restocking the guestbook table. She leaned in and whispered that she recognized me from Ryan's wedding invite list. I waited for judgment. Instead, she just said, "Good for you," and walked away. That one sentence followed me all the way home. The next day at work, my manager called me into a meeting. The rebranding pitch I had helped create had been approved. The client loved it. The team wanted me to lead the visual concept phase. I said yes, without pausing to think about it, without calling anyone for permission. That night, I came home to the same creaky apartment, tossed my shoes in the corner, and walked into the bathroom. I turned the lights on and stood in front of the mirror. The girl looking back had shorter hair, a tired face, and paint still smudged on her knuckles. For the first time since I could remember, I didn't flinch. I didn't try to adjust my expression. I just stared, and it was enough. I didn't delete my parents' messages. I didn't answer them either. I didn't explain the exhibit, the article, or the painting titles. I didn't justify a single thing. I simply stood still and let the world see me, red paint and all. The journalist emailed again. She said the response to the first article had been bigger than they expected and asked if I would consider a follow-up. I said yes, but this time I chose the title myself. I called it, "Perfect Daughters Don't Start Fires, but They Know How to Burn." The feature ran on a Sunday, a full-page spread, including a new photo of me standing in front of Clean Burn, the title piece from the exhibit. The fallout came quickly. 2 days after it was published, the gallery owner forwarded me an email. It was from my mother. She demanded they take down all my pieces, citing family privacy violations. She claimed I had used private moments and turned them into public spectacle. The gallery owner replied directly to her and CC'd me in. He told her there was no legal claim. The work was original and the gallery had every right to display it. He ended it with, "Respectfully, we stand with the artist." A few days later, my mother's church group reached out to her. She had chaired their annual charity gala for the past 6 years. They told her they were going in a new direction this year. She left me a voicemail. It started with "How could you?" and ended with 30 seconds of sobbing. I didn't call back. I didn't delete it either. I just saved it under a folder labeled Unsent Responses. My aunt sent me a text the next day. She said, "Your mother says she doesn't know who you are anymore." I wrote back, "She never did," and muted the conversation. In therapy that week, my therapist gave me a task: write a letter to your younger self. I took it seriously. I wrote 3 full pages. I told her I was sorry for letting them silence her. I promised she wasn't crazy. I reminded her that being too much was just code for hard to control. I cried after every paragraph. Out of nowhere, Ryan's new fiancée Yancey emailed me. Her message was short, kind, and unexpected. She thanked me. She said she could tell I had set him free from a life neither of us really fit into. She wrote, "He's not bad, just not for you." I sat with that sentence for a long time. The following weekend, my brother showed up. He didn't text first. He knocked on my door and stood there with his hands in his pockets. He didn't defend them this time. He apologized, not for siding with them, but for staying silent, for watching me bend and fold myself without ever saying a word. I let him in. We sat on the floor. I told him about my next exhibit. I said, "It's called Inheritance." He asked if it was about them. I said, "It's about what I won't carry forward." Inheritance was darker, more layered. I used childhood photos, some real, some recreated from memory, but only mine. Faces scratched out, outlines painted over, chaos bleeding out from the frames. One piece was called Father's Favorite Chair. It was just an empty chair in the center of a canvas, surrounded by muddy reds and a torn photograph tucked into the corner. People cried in front of it. One woman stayed for over 15 minutes, then left without speaking. A stranger walked up to me near the exit one evening and asked if I was afraid of burning bridges. I told them, "Some bridges only lead back to cages." They didn't argue, just nodded and walked away. Midweek, I got a message from someone I hadn't worked with in years, a former coworker from my first corporate job. She said her daughter had been struggling with the same kind of pressure. She asked if I'd be willing to do a private showing in their home for a small group of women. I said yes. The viewing was quiet, respectful. Her daughter came up to me after and said, "I didn't know anyone else felt like this." Then the letter arrived, a small white envelope from the local arts council. I had applied for a grant months ago, back when I still hesitated before calling myself an artist. Inside was a check, not a huge amount, just enough to cover supplies and rent for a month, and a short note congratulating me for being selected. I pinned the note on my wall above my desk. That night, I went digging through an old photo album I had pulled from my parents' storage unit before I moved out. I found one of those posed family pictures. Everyone sitting stiff on a couch, me in a pastel dress, my hands full just right. I looked at the little girl in the photo for a long time. Then I pulled out a brush and a tube of red acrylic. I painted over her face in a single stroke. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain it to anyone. I hung the altered photo in my hallway and titled it Extinction Ritual. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about releasing her. That's what it's been about all along. It's not destroying what they built, but refusing to carry its weight anymore. They made the ashes. I just stopped pretending they were gold. The private showing at my former coworker's home turned into more than just a quiet evening. What started as a small gathering became something larger when a few guests from the local arts community showed up. Some of them brought their partners. One person had a notebook, another had a camera. By the end of the night, 3 people asked if I would accept commissions. I thanked them but said no, not because I didn't appreciate it, because I wasn't done painting for myself yet. Every piece was still a conversation I hadn't finished having. A week later, my brother came to another gallery night. This time, he brought his wife and their daughter. At the door, he introduced me to someone nearby and called me the one who reminded me what choosing yourself looks like. He didn't say it to impress me. He said it like it was just true. His daughter wandered through the room, eventually finding a corner where I kept leftover materials. I gave her a blank canvas and a cheap set of brushes. She painted a sun with too many arms and splashes of green in the sky. I told her it was perfect and meant it. A few days later, I received one last letter from my mother. It came in a pale blue envelope, addressed in her looping script. It wasn't long. She wrote, "I'm sorry I didn't understand you. I still don't. But I hope you find what you're looking for." There was no guilt in it, no subtle push to come back. I placed it in the drawer with the others, but I didn't burn it. I never heard from my father again. Not after the gallery show. Not after the newspaper feature. Nothing. The silence didn't sting this time. It felt settled, like something had finally run out of air. I moved out of my apartment at the end of the month. A friend of Jenna's had a small loft above her ceramic studio. Wooden floors, raw walls, no insulation. I took it without hesitation. The light came through the windows in strange patterns, and the ceiling made old sounds when it rained. I loved it. There were no rules about furniture, no neutral palette to follow. I painted one wall a deep orange, hung crooked art on another. The money from the canceled wedding was still untouched, sitting in a separate account. I used it to launch something I'd been sketching out since the first show, an informal weekend retreat for women like me. Women who had been boxed in by families that looked polished from the outside but suffocating inside. I called it Ash Bloom, a place for those burning off their old names. 12 women showed up. One of them stood during introductions and said, "I thought I was the only one." I replied, "We all think that, until we say it out loud." And then the stories started coming. On a walk the next morning, I visited the park near my childhood home. I didn't take a detour. I walked straight through it, hands in my coat pockets. The trees looked smaller than I remembered. A girl played piano under the gazebo, choppy, uneven. Her mother clapped anyway. I sat on a nearby bench and stayed until the final note. Later that evening, I returned to the studio and painted something new. Not for a show, not for submission, but just one for me. I called it Permission. A locked box cracked open, wildflowers spilling through the hinges. I didn't sign it. I didn't hang it. I kept it leaning against the wall by my desk. I applied for a fellowship in a city far away, one I'd never lived in, never even visited. But the program focused on artists exploring personal reclamation. I wrote a short paragraph about why I wanted it. 2 weeks later, I got the acceptance email. I packed light. 2 suitcases. 1 sketchbook. No framed photos. No family keepsakes. Before I left, Jenna came by with a parting gift. A photo she had printed and framed from the night of my first gallery exhibit. I was standing in front of unmolding, my hands behind my back, head tilted like I wasn't sure I belonged there. I looked nervous, yes, but I also looked real. The morning I left, I took the early train. The platform was mostly empty. As it pulled away, I leaned back in the seat and watched the skyline fall behind the trees. I didn't text anyone. I didn't post about the move. I didn't even write a farewell message to the version of me I just left behind. I just whispered, "Watch me grow now," and let the silence carry the rest.